I come to you today from the frigid Midwest to talk to you about an idea for a new game mechanic for JWE3. I call it the gene sequence gap. It's inspired by this scene from the movie.
Virtual reality displays show our geneticists the gaps in the DNA sequence. We use the complete DNA of a frog to fill in the holes and complete the code.
The general progression path for any dinosaur species is this. You research the species to unlock all of the dig sites, you excavate all of the fossils, you complete the genome, and then you clone the animal. That's not really in line with the first movie. In fact, even the later movies established the dinosaur genomes aren't really pure until Dominion. This whole process then could be spiced up to be more interesting and be more in line with the franchise. Now, penalties exist for cloning dinosaurs with a reduced genome percentage, but you never really do that. But what if you had to do that? What if the game was engineered in a way where you had to make use of limited genetic material? Now, the starting point for this new mechanic is a revamped dig site system that changes the way fossils unlock. How this works is your research unlocks a particular dig site rather than a particular animal. And every animal is found in multiple dig sites. And these dig sites are staggered throughout your progression in the park, meaning you get partial genome early, and in the late stages of the park, that's the only time you can complete a full genome. For animals that in real life only come from a single dig site or only have a single fossil known, you instead have these multi-tiered dig sites labeled like A, B, and C. And instead of them adding new, like Hell Creek A, Hell Creek B, Hell Creek C, and having be different points on the map, it actually updates the existing dig site just to reduce map clutter, which is already getting kind of out of hand in the JWE games. And then this spices everything up by making your genome completion a long-term project. Instead of you picking an animal, finishing it, picking the next animal, finishing it, you're incrementally making your animals better over time as you work on a broad range of species within a park, making the gameplay much more dynamic. Now, onto the gene sequence gap itself. These low-quality partial genomes require some other modern DNA to fill the gaps in exactly the same situation as displayed in the first movie. Each species in the game will have a different degree of compatibility with potential modern animals, and each modern DNA itself will come with a set of advantages and disadvantages. You can think of these gene gap sequence fillers as a extension of the existing gene modification system, but they're cheaper and less impactful along any particular metric, but they have a wider range of effects. So think of a lot of small effects all changing the animal in subtle ways rather than like some really dramatic increase to like lifespan only, right? Like a gene mod does. These gene sequence gap fillers are also essentially more random than the existing genetic modifiers. You don't get to tune the percentage of the gene expressing. These genes will have a range of different effects they could express, and you don't know which ones will show up on a given animal. And when you're selecting eggs in the hatchery, you get no information about which traits have actually been expressed from the modern DNA. You don't know until you've hatched it, and some of those traits will remain hidden even after the animal is hatched. Something that changes environmental needs or appeal will be very obvious, but some more subtle behavioral stuff you won't see until it actually comes into play later in the park. Now, what are these gap fillers? These are modern animals. I've specifically picked things established as DNA gap fillers in the franchise, and then sprinkled in one other option just for variety's sake. So we've got, obviously, frog, common reed frog specifically, which is the Jurassic Park 1 gene sequence gap filler. This is kind of the starter option in the game conceptually. It makes sense, right? It's the one from the first film. It should be the starter one. Building off of that, we've got the gene sequence gaps that were used for the Raptor Squad. Blue uses Black-throated monitor, Delta uses bird, and Charlie uses green iguana. And then we've also got the added genes from the hybrids. Less of a gap, more of an intentional hybridization thing, but they still work really well here for adding variety to the system. Pit viper and cuttlefish from the Indominus, and then scorpionfish from the Scorpius Rex. And then just to mix it all up in the end, we also throw in a mammal. I've selected bat because of the legacy of there being bat genes in like JWE1 for increased lifespan. Now, the frog DNA being the base one also is the one that I use to kind of outline a lot of the other changes here that will be made as a result, would theoretically be made as a result of this system being introduced into the game. I should say this could be introduced theoretically as like some sort of campaign DLC, like a new campaign that is built around this sort of thing, kind of like how we had the Amber Mine in the Biosyn DLC in JWE2. I think this is entirely plausibly something they could add to the game. It's not simple. It's not an easy change. It is a substantial change. And so it would have to be like a large paid DLC. but it's also something that I think you could add to the game as a sandbox and challenge mode option as well, to really spice up the gameplay progression. Also, Frontier, if you watch this for some reason, just take this idea. I really don't care. I'd like this to be in the game, and I can't do it, so you should do it. Now, frog DNA. Frog DNA slightly increases the animal's wetland need. So this is the kind of effect that would be obvious, in the park. You would see the animal needs more wetland than it typically needs. These animals are also better adapted for a jungle biome, so they have a better comfort level in a jungle biome. Famously, the reason frog DNA was relevant to Jurassic Park is because frog DNA enabled the animals to change from female to male in a single-sex environment. And in the same way, that mechanic would be represented in the game if you use frog DNA as a gene sequence gap filler. There would be a small chance for any animal using the frog DNA, if you have only females, for the females to convert to a male secretly. Here's the big thing. It's secret. It's a secret male. So you don't click on the animal and see that it's now got the male icon. It would still show a female icon. In the same way that the male is secret, the juveniles hatch from the male breeding with your females would also be secret. Rather than needing a nest in the way you currently do in JWE3, these juveniles would basically just secretly spawn when you're not looking at the paddock. And these would be wild juveniles, kind of similar to when you encounter a wild dinosaur in the campaign. Except in this case, they would not have map icons. So there would be no way for you to go into, the bird's eye view, the map overlay, and see, oh, there's dinosaurs here that there shouldn't be. You would not be able to see them that way. You'd have to actually scroll around the park and just happen to notice it, or get, of course, an alert that they've attacked your guests or other dinosaurs. Now, of course, this would also come with some security reworks, right? Obviously, your adult dinosaurs would be contained within fences. So if the juveniles spawned, well, you would know that they've escaped if they break down a fence for some reason, right? Instead, we introduce a system where the lower security fences can't contain juveniles. They're essentially, like in Jurassic Park, right? You see the electric fence, it's got these big gaps. Timmy should be able to just crawl right through that fence. He shouldn't have to climb over it, but it's a movie, it's fine. In the same way, the fences would be optimized to contain an adult, but not a juvenile who's small enough they could slip between the wires, allowing them to roam the park. This is actually like a plot point in the novel, essentially, that the juveniles are uncontained by the fences and the moats and all the security systems. And then if you use higher tier fences, these would be enabled to actually contain juveniles. And I think this would just be a good base game change to limit the overpowered mechanic that is breeding your dinosaurs. If you had to specifically invest in high security fences before you could have juveniles safely without them escaping, that would be an interesting twist. It could potentially be also a way to add a little bit of flavor to scavengers and small herbivores as well, animals that could conceptually slip through a fence. This system would make use of the existing security camera object we have that's new to JWE3 as a way to detect these wild juveniles that you don't know about and be alerted to them before they cause trouble. So if you have a park full of animals cloned with frog DNA as a sequence gap filler, you could set up a bunch of security cameras and, really smartly build your park to keep an eye on them under the idea that they could wildly breed. I propose further adding another security option to the game, which would be a motion tracking system. This is present in the novel in particular, but also mentioned in the film and seen just out of frame if you watch the open map. You can see that in the image here with the red arrow pointing at the red-topped motion tracker just off to the edge of the frame. You can also see it reflected in the window in one shot in the film. I believe that's just in the film. That's not like an open map thing. But again, these things they were designed. You can see images of the props. They almost don't ever show up in the movie. And these motion trackers are essentially a more expensive version of the ranger stations. What I propose is they function exactly like a ranger station, but now you don't need a Jeep to be assigned and come to it. It functions automatically, right? So this is also potentially a way in late game to optimize the management of your park instead of needing 2 ranger stations and, these Jeeps traveling all over the park to all these different ranger stations. You could upgrade to these late game motion tracking systems and eliminate the need for that. These would definitely be late game. This is not intended as an early game counter for the unauthorized breeding. This is a late game way to mitigate the consequences of the choices you made in early game and also just add some optimizations to the game as far as security management goes. I also propose some additional changes to the medical teams. When you have these unauthorized juveniles, you must sedate them and then actually tag them for integration into the park. This is a medical task. You have to assign a scientist to this job. Furthermore, if you want to actually identify which of your females has changed to be a male, you need to dispatch the medical team and actually do an analysis in the field. The medical team has to sedate the animal and check to see if it's a male. You have to do this one by one until you identify the male, if this is important to you. You can just not identify the male. You can just let them continue to breed like wildly. But if you want to actually do a structured breeding program using the existing JWE3 mechanics, then you need to identify which one is the male, of course. And then if you want to counter unauthorized breeding, you can actually perform a sterilization in the medical facility. So if we identify the male in the field, we can then sedate it, transport it to medical, and instead of doing your traditional vet task to counter whatever's wrong with it, you could pick to specifically do a sterilization. And this would replace the existing contraceptive system, with the contraceptive system instead being like a late game upgrade, allowing you to control whether or not they breed with a toggle instead of it being permanent, because sterilization would not be reversible. So that's the bulk of the changes, of course, but we also do have the other gene sequence gaps we can talk about, what I propose, or at least my first pass ideas for what they would offer. Starting with a black-throated monitor that was used to create the Velociraptor Blue, this adds parthenogenesis, a very small chance for your female animals to clone themselves, to give birth to a juvenile that is an exact replica of themselves. The same cosmetics, the exact same genes, and again, this would be a wild-born animal that you would have to tag that could escape through your low security fences. It would come with all the perils of the frog breeding. It would just be a more of a rare one-time event and be a perfect clone. Then to add a little extra bonus to the monitor DNA and tie it in kind of with its usage and in generating the raptor pack, the monitor DNA increases your general synthesis chance for any carnivore species it's used with. And then we have the green iguana that was used when synthesizing Charlie. I think it was Charlie, maybe it was Delta. I always mix the two up. I think Charlie's bird, actually. I think this was Delta. This takes DNA from the famously invasive green iguana, which has the effect of making the animal more capable of adapting to its environment. It reduces the environmental needs. It makes it so the animal itself functions better as an invasive species, right? Now, the downside here, there's kind of a thing with iguanas, right? Where they go like hypothermic and they like fall out of trees and hit you in the head and stuff or whatever. I never lived in the South. This is all hearsay to me. But as a counterpoint for the green iguana DNA, you get this better environmental need, but you are much more susceptible to hypothermia to like a dangerous degree. Bird DNA provides higher appeal because it is more accurate to the real animal, and the visitors like that more conceptually, and provides good compatibility across most species of dinosaur and bird, as these are all archosaurs, as opposed to using a lizard, which is more removed from the dinosaur family tree than a bird is. Just for fun, bird would add a additional appeal and compatibility bonus to specifically the feathered animals in the game, just because it makes too much sense not to do it. Now, the big downside of bird is increased susceptibility to the already very annoying avian influenza and avian pox diseases, because they got avian in the title. Duh. On to the mammal. This is the one that, of course, is just kind of in there to mix things up. Just fabricated wholesale by me. The big thing is that rabies is specifically a mammal disease. It makes no sense in the Jurassic World Evolution franchise that the dinosaurs can get rabies conceptually, because that's not how it works. It literally only affects mammals. So what I propose is we take it so that the downside of using mammal DNA as a gap filler is when the dinosaurs can get rabies. That is the only time they can get rabies. And rabies is already a pretty disruptive and sneaky disease in your park. And so I think it works to make it specifically the downside of mammals, right? And then to build, benefits off of this too, then we do the opposite of the green iguana. Mammals famously warm-blooded, adapted to colder climates better than reptiles. So these animals resist hypothermia. Perhaps don't even get it, maybe. That would be a nice counterpoint if you don't want to deal with hypothermia during your snowstorms, right? And furthermore, they have longer lifespans. That's a tie back to the JWE1 bat genes. That's the idea there. And then just add a little bit more to it, better compatibility with pterosaurs. Pterosaurs generally take well to bat DNA because flying animals, even though the wing structures are completely different and they're unrelated, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's close enough. There needs to be something. Now we have pit viper coming from the Indominus genome. These animals may become venomous. So if you give pit DNA pit viper DNA to any carnivore, then that thing might attack something in your park or fight another member of its species, and suddenly you'll find out they have poison. And now I need to treat, this other animal that's now been poisoned by this. Pit vipers are known for having heat-sensing pits, so this has a chance to make the animals nocturnal. They're more adapted to night, since this is a snake, and snakes famously don't eat a lot. They eat a lot once, and then they hang out for 2 weeks and don't eat again or whatever. I never raised snakes. You have a reduced food need on these animals. They have to eat less. Again, building off of the infrared sensing pits, these animals have a higher hunt success chance on average. And since rattlesnakes are pit vipers, or at least some, I don't know how that works exactly. I'm not a snakeologist. These animals have increased comfort in an arid biome. Tying back into the poison, the pit viper has higher compatibility with Dilophosaurus, Troodon, and Compsognathus, the animals that are traditionally depicted as poisonous in the franchise. Another DNA gap filler coming from the Indominus is the cuttlefish. This may add the camouflage gene, allowing the animal to change color. Now, this would probably be difficult. Maybe this is not even within the tech limits of the game, but I think it should be doable. It should essentially be taking the camo effect from the Indominus and applying it as like a shader to any animal. I would think that is doable. This would also add a new effect to the camouflage genes, making the animal harder to track with automated security. You would have less of a chance of actually getting a notification for this animal doing something naughty using your cameras and motion trackers. Now, part of the reason the cuttlefish DNA was explained as being added to the Indominus genome is because it sped up the growth of the animal. So we represent this in game by having animals that are synthesized using cuttlefish DNA incubate faster. They come out of the hatchery quicker. Furthermore, we also have juveniles descended from animals that have integrated cuttlefish DNA into their genome grow up faster as well. Now, cuttlefish are famously aquatic, so there is a higher water need to these animals, and it also comes with a higher compatibility with marine species. Marine species are going to work better if you use the DNA for a modern aquatic animal. Now, famously, cephalopods tend to live pretty short lifespans, so the downside of cuttlefish DNA is the animal is going to have a reduced lifespan. Another aquatic one is the scorpionfish, coming from the Scorpius rex. Again, this species may become venomous, very much in the same way as the pit viper. This comes with another higher water need, in the same way that we had higher water need on cuttlefish. But it does provide a small bonus to appeal and comfort. And this comes with specifically a higher compatibility for the actual fish in the game, the Megalodon and the Dunkleistes. Now, I feel like the scorpionfish is a little undercooked here. I kind of struggle. Like a lot of the other gene sequence gaps kind of wrote themselves for the most part. It was very easy to slot in, this does this, obviously. But when I got the scorpionfish, it was like everything it would obviously do, something else is already done. So I feel like this one could be cut. We could just get rid of this. We don't need scorpionfish, but I kept it in anyway because it was in my notes when I was making these slides. Now, let's talk a bit about the hybrids and special skins, right? So you can still always choose to use the gene sequence gap even when you have full DNA. This is an option. You have to use it when you don't have full DNA, and then it's an option when you do get full. So you can still slightly hybridize your animals if you want. Certain special skins are only available if you have the right gene sequence gap. If I want to make blue in my park, I have to specifically make a Velociraptor with black-throated monitor as the gene sequence gap filler. For hybrids, the hybrids can use multiple gene sequence gap fillers instead of being limited to a single specific animal, specifically allowing you to make the Indominus Rex with pit viper and cuttlefish and frog, which were the three modern animals used in its creation. And these would actually be a requirement of creating the hybrid because these were canonically part of it. And so yeah, that's the idea. That's the full spiel here. Sound off in the comments. Let me know what you think about this idea. I think this would be really, really cool, and I am completely confident that we will never see this happen. But a fella can dream, right? And if you enjoy these videos, be sure to like and subscribe and all that crap. It helps the channel out, etc., etc. It pays for my crippling addiction to the basic human needs of shelter, food, and water. All right, job done.